Hi there, Internet. My name's Court, and welcome to my weekly Game of Thrones Season 7 review series. Quick word of warning, these vids will be full of spoilers, so tap out now if you haven't seen the episode yet. But now, Season 7, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall. Let's do this. The episode begins with Jon's crew, including Jorah, Tormund, the Hound, Thoros of Myr, Beric Dondarrion, Gendry, and a couple of randos, moving further north in their attempt to capture a White. Tormund is messing with Gendry, and Jon offers Longclaw to Jorah as it is a Mormont sword. Jorah refuses it because he brought shame to his house, and because Jeor gave it to Jon. It's Jon's sword. At Winterfell, Arya confronts Sansa, having found Sansa's scroll begging Robb to come to King's Landing back in Season 1. Arya tells Sansa that she betrayed her family. Sansa explains that she was a scared little girl, but Arya isn't buying it. Sansa asks Arya who she's shown the note to, and Arya deduces that Sansa is scared that if the news of the note gets out, the Northern Lords will no longer support Sansa. In the war room at Dragonstone, Tyrion and Dany discuss heroism, Jon, Cersei. Tyrion mentions that Jon has fallen in love with Dany, but she doesn't seem to believe him. They discuss the plan that Tyrion has for meeting with Cersei. They will have all three dragons, as well as the Unsullied and the Dothraki horde, so that if anyone attempts to touch Dany, the entire place will burn. In the north, Jon's crew are trudging through a blizzard when they see the shape of a bear in the distance. The bear has glowing blue eyes. Zombie bear attacks, and one of the randos is killed. Thoros is mauled before they can kill the bear. Apparently, showrunners Benioff and Weiss have been pushing to get a zombie bear into the show for a few seasons. They were always told, no, we can't afford it, but now they finally got their way. Still, I don't think the bear looked all that great, but that's probably because the dragon's share of the budget was spent on the set piece at the end of the episode. Thoros survives his injuries after chugging some wine and allowing Beric to cauterize his wounds with the flaming sword. Back at Winterfell, Sansa is discussing the Arya situation with Littlefinger, who suggests using Brienne of Tarth against Arya. Brienne swore to protect both of Cat's daughters, but if Arya were to try and harm Sansa, Brienne would have to intervene. The hunting party spots a small group of Whites as well as a White Walker. A battle ensues, and Jon kills the Walker with his Valyrian steel sword. As the Walker shatters into ice crystals, many of the Whites also drop dead. The assumption is made that these Whites were turned by this particular Walker, and that's why they died when he did. They manage to capture the last living White, but it starts screaming, alerting the army of the dead to their presence. That's not what you want. Jon sends Gendry to haul ass back to Eastwatch and send a raven to Dany at Dragonstone. The remaining Suicide Squad break into a run as what is probably the full army of the dead approach. They manage to make it onto a somewhat frozen lake with an island of rock in the center. Thousands of Whites surround them and start moving in when the ice collapses and many Whites are plunged into the water. A standoff begins with the Magnificent Seven standing vigil on the rock with the Night King and his minions all around them. In the morning, they find that Thoros has frozen to death in his sleep and they burn his body. Beric Dondarrion believes that if they were to kill the Night King, all of the rest would die. Back at Winterfell, Sansa receives an invitation from Cersei inviting her to King's Landing. She decides not to go, but sends Brienne in her stead. Brienne argues, believing Sansa not to be safe with Littlefinger, but Sansa gives her no choice. After receiving the raven, Dany climbs on Drogon and is ready to take the other two dragons to go save Jon and his crew. Tyrion begs her not to go, saying that sometimes doing nothing is the hardest thing, and that she could easily be killed. But, she doesn't like to be told what to do, so she goes anyway. Frustrated with the standoff, Sandor starts throwing rocks at Whites, as you do. One of these rocks doesn't make it all the way to the Whites and lands on the surface of the lake, which has become refrozen overnight. The Whites realize this, and a full-scale attack begins. The crew fight valiantly, but the odds are ridiculously against them. Tormund is grabbed by a handful of Whites and is almost dragged into the lake when the Hound saves him. A couple more randos are killed, and it's looking bad for our fur-clad brethren. But fortunately, we get a Dany ex machina. She arrives and her three dragons start torching everything in sight, killing hundreds of Whites. She pulls up the entire hunting party, minus Jon, of course, onto Drogon's back. The Night King takes an ice spear from one of his generals and shot puts it right into Viserion's throat. The dragon crashes to the lake dead and sinks into the water. The Night King pulls out another spear. Jon sees this and shouts at Dany to take off. The Night King launches the spear, but it misses Drogon slightly as he's taking wing. Jorah almost falls off the dragon, but manages to hang on. Jon keeps fighting waves of Whites until he is knocked into the water. He manages to drag himself out of the lake, because symbolic rebirth is symbolic, and tries to continue fighting, but dude, you got no chance. Fortunately, we get a Benjen ex machina. Cold Hands shows up and starts killing whites. Jon has a brief moment to recognize the uncle he hasn't seen since the first season, but Benjen places Jon on his horse and sends him off to the wall. Benjen turns to fight for as long as he can, but is seemingly killed. Dany waits atop the wall at Eastwatch, hoping that somehow Jon will return. Eventually, she decides that it's fruitless and turns to leave when a mostly unconscious Jon comes riding out of the forest towards the gate. He's nearly frozen to death, so they load him onto a ship in a nice warm bed. Dany sees the scars all over his chest, and we can infer that now she's starting to believe these little snippets she's heard about him being resurrected. At Winterfell, Sansa searches Arya's quarters and finds some of her faces. Arya shows up and seemingly threatens Sansa, suggesting that all she would need to do would be to cut off Sansa's face and Arya could become her. She pulls out the cat's paw dagger but ends up giving it to Sansa. I mentioned this in the video last week that I hope and I think Arya knows she's being manipulated by Littlefinger and that she's playing along with it to give him a false sense of security. I still feel that way. I want to see these sisters come together to defeat Baelish, and I believe that's what's being set up here. Somewhere on the high seas, Dany visits Jon, who's just come to. He tells her that he's sorry for her loss and wishes they had never gone on the mission. She tells him that she was glad they did because now she completely believes the threat. And you know, seeing is believing. They have a tender moment, but totally don't make out at all, and he tells her that she is his queen, and that he would bend the knee if he could, get out of bed. And then they still totally don't make out. Finally, back in the north, the whites, who totally have chains now, drag Viserion's body out of the lake. The Night King lays his hand on the dragon's snout, and boom! The eye opens, it's blue. Zombie dragon. Now the Night King can presumably just fly over the wall, which is probably a bad thing. Now I'm a little mixed on this episode. I mean, the battle was great, and who doesn't love some hot and sexy dragon on zombie action? But still, a few of the beats felt almost criminally convenient. Can't complain too much though, I was on the edge of my seat for the whole episode. I hate that next week is the season finale. So those are my thoughts on Beyond the Wall. What did you guys think of it? Do you think the Night King is gonna try and fly to King's Landing next week? Will Dany and Jon finally make out? Whatever your thoughts, hit the comments below and let's discuss. If you liked this review, please smash that like button and give it a share if you really liked it. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, you can do so by clicking the Courtshake logo at the bottom right of your screen. My review of the season finale of Game of Thrones will be up next Monday. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.